Would the Ultra Greatswords from Dark Souls 3 work as actual swords? Starting off with this Zweihander, yeah, it's a sword that existed historically from Germany, and it was one of the larger swords that was used by human beings. They typically range from between 5 and I think there have been 12-pound examples that have been in regular use. Anything heavier than that was usually more a display piece, but however, I just call them a regular greatsword, not an Ultra Greatsword. Now, the regular greatsword isn't in the regular greatsword category, it's in the Ultra Greatsword category, and it's pretty much a Berserk reference. So instead of saying the normal "it's too big to be a sword" Berserk quote that I love saying in this context, I'm going to talk about how Berserk gets big swords right just for a second. In Berserk, Guts using a big sword isn't like Cloud or Zabuza or whoever else finding a massive sword and then just using it because that's what they do. In my analysis of the psyche of Guts from Berserk, he's given a— stop biting me. He's given a large sword as a child and told that, we don't have kid swords here. And as he grows up and, is abused, is traumatized, which are big themes in Berserk, I personally think that he comes to see using larger weapons than he's otherwise able to as kind of like a form of seeking acceptance. So he's always looking to use larger and larger swords because then maybe Gambino would finally accept him. So instead of just finding a big sword and using it, we see his process of actively seeking out larger weapons to use. Here's a dog. The Farron Greatsword, I love this weapon set and these bosses. They're just like so cool to me. And I think that the Greatsword would definitely be usable if you had two hands to use it, but using an offhand dagger in that way wouldn't really be practical. I think that you could probably do some of the moveset that they have, but not like one after another. You'd have to swing the sword, do the move, and then recover a bit, and then do the next step of the move. And I also want to point out that using an offhand dagger as an anchor doesn't really make sense because anything that you can easily thrust into, the blade would just come out. And anything that would be difficult to thrust into would require a lot of work to do in order to just do a part of a move. The Fume Ultra Greatsword, too big and too rough. The Profaned Greatsword might actually be usable according to its weight. However, I want to point out that the tang of the weapon would be incredibly thin and would probably break. And in case you don't know, the tang is the part of the steel sword itself that goes into the handle, and that allows it to, be maneuvered structurally. And if that's pretty thin, then that's a weak point and that could break, and if you have a massive blade attached to a really thin weak point, that's just a breakage waiting to happen. Black Knight Greatsword too big, the Cathedral Greatsword too big, here's a dog to make up for that. Orien's Greatsword would probably be liftable and, you'd be able to swing it around, but unfortunately that's because it's missing a lot of material because it's rusted, which is not ideal. The Lothric Knight Greatsword is both too large to really be maneuverable and has that thin tang problem. Astora's Greatsword would probably be perfectly fine. The Ring Knight Parried Greatswords, those, nah. And there you go. I have been super busy, so haven't really been making the content that I've been planning to make, because, that requires more work than I've otherwise have. So hopefully I'll be able to do more of that in the future, and I'll be including more dog